to hunt or, you're threatening them, they will do their best to scare you. But it's very rare that they actually will attack you.
Well, you know what I have noticed with a lot of the guests I've had on the last month and a half that claim they were abducted by aliens. A lot of them, even Calvin Parker, when I bluntly asked him, I said, do you think your abduction, they were actually, how can I say it? Did you feel like they were evil? Did you feel like they were here to serve man in a nice way, or were they here to serve man like the old Twilight Zone series, with it serve man as a cookbook? And he told me he got the impression from what he went through, it was evil. Now, I've heard that probably about 60% of the people that I've interviewed have come back and said that they didn't feel comfortable. They felt like they were, how can I say it? That they're here for a different motive than just trying to collect DNA or what have you. Then I get the other, 40% of the people say, oh, they're here to help mankind, to keep us from, having a nuclear war, keeping all this. But what scares me, like you mentioned earlier, the amount of people gone missing in the forest is a huge amount. But then when you look at the FBI statistics of people who are disappearing countrywide, with no trace, where they came and investigate because there's no way to. It's a huge amount of people are disappearing off the streets. People going to the grocery store, or going on a road trip. People are disappearing, and it's high numbers. And that's what makes me wonder. And you mentioned the word farm. I've said that repeatedly on my show, that, just because we think we're intelligent, some being maybe 20,000 years, 50,000 or 100,000 years more advanced than us might look at us as no more than an insect. So, or like how we look at when you go out hunting for deer, or you go out to the farm and there's cows and they're used for like a Burger King or a McDonald's. I mean, that could be the farm. They're harvesting people.
Well, the only report I've gotten like that is from these little people. And, all we can do is take this kind of information and, keep it on file and keep checking against other things that we learn. As far as the abductions go, I think that my own opinion from what I've pieced together is that I don't think it's a good thing. I think they're violating all sorts of universal rules by doing that. The people who have the most positive experiences aren't being abducted. They're being contacted, and there's a big difference. And the people that are contacted, they don't have a bad feeling about it. They feel good about it. They're not traumatized. They usually are contacting a person for a reason. There's one man who he suddenly saw somebody that would be like a Pleiadian standing at the end of his bed, and Pleiadians look quite human, only perhaps in a better form. And he had a very critical health condition, and in the morning he woke up and he was fine. So that is a very, very positive experience. He never felt any fear. He was healed instantaneously, or at least overnight. But that's a contact experience. That is not an abduction experience. And so I think people are very foolish to stand out there in the middle of the field and say, come and get me. I think you better really know what you're asking for, because you may not get what you think you're going to get.
No, you might be in between somebody's bun at a barbecue. I don't know. But I know Calvin Parker, said when he got abducted, him and his friend off the pier, it was like two robots that kind of, zapped him, took him aboard the craft. The next thing he wakes up, he's on a table. They're examining him. The female-looking creature was like trying to put her fingers down his throat and come out his nose. And, he was screaming because you can't do that, and he felt so violated. And it was so much pain involved that he went away, scared. And that is what the scary part. Being contacted or being abducted is two different major things. And again, we might be looking at two different species of aliens, or
there's
or
more
a
than
dozen.
two out there.
Yeah, they could be dozens and dozens, if not more. Don't forget, we've been sending out TV signals for how many years, and they're now just reaching places. So that's one thing I was going to tell you. We were talking the other night with Susan Shepard, and she was talking about where she was at. That they had a lot of, in the 60s and 70s, reporting of UFOs. And then all of a sudden, men in black would come around. And people at the start were thinking like they were government agents. But what she started telling me, which, I think it even sunk in her head, is, they were dressed all in black. Their hair was slicked back. And their appearance was probably like in the late 50s, early 60s.
Right,
so
and they're robotic in the way they act.
Right, and then the vehicles. A lot of people have told me that they see men in black. They always come and tell me the same thing, that their vehicles were black, but they weren't new. They look brand new, but they're like 20-year-old or 15-year-old cars. Mm-hmm. And that kind of makes me sometimes wonder, like, our TV signals are reaching out in space. That's what they think, that how we dress, that's what we drive. So when they come here, that's what they, put into our mind or whatever when you see them, that's what they look like. And they think that's the way we look. But they're behind times.
Your description of the Men in Black is certainly... seems to be universal. Any reports I hear, they sound about the same. Your theory on why they look the way they do is very interesting. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but of course I do not know.
Yeah, well, TV signals will take anywhere from 5, 10, 15, 30 years to reach out to their limits. So it depends on, who picks it up. Can you imagine being an alien race and all of a sudden you're picking up a signal, Leave It to Beaver, and you think, oh, this is what this world is like. Or cowboys and Indians, like Cheyenne or, shows like that. They come down here and they expect us to be in covered wagons yet.
I don't know. It's an interesting theory, except they're cruising so close to us, and they can zip around the universe so quickly that I think they're not behind on what we are like.
No, that theory too, I agree with. But then again, here in the last 2.5 weeks, they actually got photographs of something coming out of a black hole, which they have never managed ever to see any object come out of a black hole. They always came.
Usually they disappear into it, right?
Right, and they're tore apart and it's gone. Well, a big object came out of the black hole here recently. They got photographs of it, which now blows the theory away. Maybe these aliens are using a black hole besides portals or whatever to get here.
And that just may be a giant portal.
Well, yeah, it could be. I don't want to find out, though.
We certainly live in a time of many mysteries.
Oh, we do. Now, these little people. Now, up here, up by Clearwater, Washington, there is a researcher. It claims that there's little people, but they're like 6 inches, what she says, tall.
Yeah, now that's not what I'm talking about. The ones that I'm talking about are typically 3.5 feet tall.
No, that's quite a bit different. But even that is small.
And that's the size. Well, I think I told you we were out in South Dakota in the fall and went to one of the reservations out there, and they have the little people that are still living there. And the description again is what we hear, which is about 3.5 feet tall.
Now, when this guy has seen him, is he saying, are they dressed in some type of clothing? Or are they running around naked? And are they hairy? This out of curiosity.
All right, they're not all the same as far as, the culture and the way they dress. The ones that are here, and I've gotten reports since I wrote my book called Cherokee Little People Were Real, that they still exist. They exist in very remote areas, and they're described as looking very much like the Cherokee people themselves. We got our first photo, not that terrible, about maybe 2 years ago. And I first learned about little people back in the very, very late 1990s. maybe 99, 98, 92,000, and have never, ever seen a picture of one. Well, actually, friends of mine live on another mountain ridge around here and on a, single lane gravel road, and they had a, what do you call it, a game camera set up by the driveway, and a bird flew by it and triggered it, and they saw this image of what looked to be a little human figure in the distance. And they debated talking to me about it because between themselves they couldn't decide, is this a ghost? Is it a little person? What in the world are we seeing? And they finally decided to show it to me. And what I did was an experiment. I upped the contrast on the computers, and so that anything alive would almost go into a magenta range.
Uh-huh.
And if it were a ghost, which was their other possibility, or a spirit, it wouldn't do that. So on the posting, I had this photo before and then turned up so it went to magenta, which indicated it was alive. I also had 2 confirmed photos of ghosts and did the same thing. With the ghost or with the spirit, the figure did not go into the magenta range. It stayed in the white range. So it indicated that it was indeed a living creature. The picture was taken in August when it was very hot, and the little creature seemed to be wearing little or no clothes. When we were out in the Dakotas, the description, was similar to the people there. However, the ones in eastern Tennessee look more European. In fact, the man described them as dressing almost like something similar to lederhosen, and wearing hats, and the old people would use like a walking stick to walk with. And then it gets more complicated because this man, who looks very, very white, has some Uchi Indian in him. And there is a connection between the Uchi Indians and these little people. About the time I was doing the research on this, trying to confirm that what the man was telling me was true, I came across the research of a man who specializes in the history of the Indians in the southeastern part of this country. And he had just recently discovered that back maybe a couple thousand years ago, there was a major flood in Ireland and along the European coast. And he said that some of the people fled Ireland and ended up coming into where like Savannah is now in our country. Then they went up the river. So the Uchi Indians are perhaps actually white people that originated from Ireland. And since the little people look so different here where the Uchi Indians are, then maybe they were the little people that came from Ireland. I mean, you start digging into this stuff and you go, oh my goodness, could this possibly be true? You just don't know. But the Uchi Indians were able to be translators for different tribes. They could speak different languages. They communicated among the tribes, sort of like interpreters. And so they were not your typical Indians of the area. So they might very well have come from Ireland.
That's a possibility. I find it fascinating. I know that the guests I had on my show, talking about in Clearwater, Washington, about these little people, she claims too, and she's actually sent me pictures where she went through and enhanced the contrast like you said you did on the computer. And, you could, I hate to say it might sound strange, but they had like hats. And one of them looked like he had glasses on. And I was looking at that and I was in total shock. And that's what she claims, that they are dressed like leprechauns almost.
Yeah, and these particular little people, the ones in Tennessee, they go out on this hill that's on, the man has like 200 acres, and it's on a bluff area, and a lot of it's wooded, and it overlooks the river, and sometimes when it's foggy, he said the little people will go out on the top of this hill and dance and sing. And he had some people who were doing work for him, repairing fences and things like that. And they heard this, and it spooked them, and they ran